the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is the author of several books, no other than Miss Gwen Tolios.
Hello, everyone.
Well,
Nice to meet you.
yes, welcome to Book 101, Miss Gwen. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Gwen. I'm a queer author from Chicago, and I primarily write short stories. I do a lot of flash fiction. I do a lot of shorter short stories, by which I mean usually anything under 3,000 words. And I've been published in a variety of anthologies. I've helped put some together, and I have one novel out, which is
Mhm.
a sapphic romance. But I have been publishing by myself independently since 21. But then, as I mentioned before, I have sold my stories into small press anthologies over the past few years as well.
Miss Gwen Tolios, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And tell us, how do you structure your writing routine or embrace productive chaos to maintain momentum?
Oh, I probably do a combination of both of those, actually. One of the big things that helps me is actually my local writers group, and we have dedicated writing time throughout the month. So every Thursday night, we all get on Zoom and we write for about 3 hours. Sometimes we might meet at a bar. The first weekend of every month, we also all get together at a coffee shop. And again, it's 3 hours of dedicated writing time, which is really important for me. I've realized is having that time set aside, both physically sometimes if I'm going to a coffee shop, and mentally, where I can say this is writing time, really helps me make progress on stories or whatever my project is for that month.
What's your philosophy for tackling the ugly first draft or any tricks to silence the inner critic?
I am what's called a discovery writer. So for me, the process is what brings me enjoyment for writing. So getting that ugly first draft is what I live for, which I want to know the story. I want to see it develop as I'm writing. So to me, that's the fun part actually, is getting to that fun draft. That's what I'm striving for. And then of course you have to edit afterwards. That's the not so fun part. But getting that first draft done and saying that I have a story, um, that's kind of what brought me to the writing table to begin with.
Healing Crystals. Can you tell us about this book?
Yeah, so this is my fourth solo collection, and this is my largest one yet. So this is actually double the amount of stories of what I've published in my previous ones, primarily short stories. And the theme here is things that break. In terms of healing crystals, such as a healer in a classic adventuring party who uses them as tools of her trade. There's people who are trying to break their marriages, trying to break strings of murders, people who inadvertently break their faith in the gods. So a lot of these small little stories that just together express and explore what happens when something that you think might be absolute isn't actually absolute, and what might be the fallout of that.
How do you balance deep research with actual writing without falling down rabbit holes?
That's a really good question. I'm really bad about that actually. I have a project in my mind that I've probably been researching for on and off for months. But I find that what helps me is putting boundaries around it. So let's say I'm researching a topic. I'm like, okay, I'm giving myself 5 minutes to go on Wikipedia and learn what I can. Or another thing that I have found is really helpful that I've actually picked up from my writers group is looking at children's resources. In many cases, if I'm writing a novel, I'm or a short story, I don't need the 300 level understanding of it. I am okay with just the basics. So, reading a children's source or a middle grade source about a topic usually gives me the information that I need to write a plausible story and prevents me from going deep into those rabbit holes.
Fey dreams and other schemes. Can you give us the synopsis without spoilers?
Yes. So, like I mentioned before, I am a short story writer. So, this is my third collection of short stories, primarily fantasy. And this actually gets into more of darker stories. I've had people tell me that some of the stories here would be considered more of dark fantasy. There's also a few short stories that would lean into sci-fi horror, I would say. So a collection of things is happening in this story, in this collection, of course, right? So you have Fae who are getting into the world and causing a bit of chaos. And then you have the scheme, and in this case would be so like mimicking aliens is one of the horror stories that's in here. um but that's what this collection primarily is darker fantasy and touching on sci-fi horror, all small little tales. So this is one of, you could probably get through this in about an hour and a half. So each story is actually really good if you just are killing time. You go to Starbucks, you order a coffee, in the time that you're waiting for your order you might be able to finish one of them. um, but that's what these are meant to be, is they're meant to be really short, impactful stories that you don't have to worry about forgetting if you're putting the book down.
What strategies help you push through the messy middle of a project when motivation dips?
So, um, part of that is my writing group again. I really cannot oversell the importance of having writer friends. If I tell them what I'm doing, then they will ask me questions. Hey, what's your progress like? Can you tell us where you're at? And that is always very good motivation for me. The other thing is, I'm pretty active on social media to the point where a lot of my short story collections bring into them stories that I've actually already released on social media. So they're things that I might have released there in my Substack. There's stories that I might have released usually on my Tumblr blog. And seeing the reactions from readers, knowing that they're liking my story and that they're sharing my stories, that is a really strong motivator, to know that people like your work.
Truly validation indeed.
Right? Yeah.
And let's talk about your fake deals. What it's all about.
Thank you. So this is my second short story collection, and this is actually the one that really got me um deep into the self-publishing sort of desire and mindset. Like I mentioned before, I tend to share my short stories online and on social media. And I had a story go viral about 2.5 years ago. People loved it way more than I expected. I started seeing like screenshots of it on Pinterest. I was like, oh my goodness. And that is actually was my inspiration for starting to put together these short story collections of my work. And so Faye Deals ended up being the fantasy version of the time. So this collects a lot of my older works, but also that viral story. And to that end, this tends to be my bestseller still, even though I feel like my writing has developed since this. So the stories in here are things about getting into a money laundering deal with the Tooth Fairy, realizing that that the musical instrument that you play is actually possessed. So these kind of more humorous looks at occurrences with fantasy creatures or spells or curses that you might find within the world. A lot more lighthearted, I would say, than Fey Dreams.
Interesting, Miss Gwen. Interesting. And how do you cultivate a distinct narrative voice, especially when switching genres or perspectives?
Oh, that is a really good question because I will admit that I switch genres a lot. Um, so like we've been talking about fantasy, but I also have science fiction stories. I've got a few contemporary ones. Um, and to me, a lot of it comes down to practice and comfort level. I have found that my voice will be a little different between a story that I'm forcing out, that I'm writing maybe for a specific occurrence, versus a story where I truly am inspired and loving the concept. Um, my voice will tend to be a little different between the two of them. I've also found that what has a bigger impact on my voice is not genre, whether I'm switching between a science fiction and a fantasy story, but the tone of the piece. So if I'm writing a darker story versus a more humorous one, that will definitely change my writer's voice. But I will also say my voice is always developing. The stuff that I'm writing in Healing Crystals is a little different than what you would find in Fey Deals. It's a difference of 3 to 4 years in my writing, and some of the stuff in Fey Deals and even the anthology that or the collection that reads near that, Tomorrow and Beyond, some of those stories are older, written in like 2015, 2016, whereas everything that's within Healing Crystals I wrote in the past 2 years. So your voice will just naturally develop as you kind of sink into the type of stories that you really like to write, but also your confidence. The more confident you are in your writing, the more distinct I will say your writing voice becomes, because you are a lot more comfortable with it and you are less likely to make changes as you edit.
What's your method for making characters feel real beyond backstory questionnaires?
Um, I will blatantly admit to just mining the people around me. I feel like every time I get together with my family, if my last name Tolios wasn't an indication, it's Greek, so it's large. I'm always hearing some new piece of family lore, which can be inspiring, or the people around me. I also am frequently inspired by characters that I see in other pieces of media. So, in a TV show, in a book, I get inspired by my own life and my own feelings. One of the difficulties I would say about writing short stories is that you don't always have the opportunity to dive deep into a character, because there's just not a lot of words there. There's only so much space. If you have 5,000 or even 2,000 words, you can't fully develop them. But what you do instead is you have more of the character in your head than what you can put on page. And so what's happening is I feel like I am dropping these little hints, which help readers feel like there's more going on, than what they're experiencing within the story, which naturally helps enrich the world, and I think also enriching the characters that are in each of those stories.
Returning to you. What it's all about, Miss Gwen.
So this is my one novel. So this is a sapphic contemporary romance, and what happened here is it follows Monica, who worked as a digital nomad for a while, and in doing so, realized that her relationship with her father started deteriorating. She comes back to Chicago to rebuild the relationship with him, realized that it's deteriorated so much that he can't stand to have her stay in his house. And so she moves in with her college roommate and best friend. And in that process, realized that she never got over the crush she had on her college best friend. So it's her trying to deal with her feelings while like sharing a bedroom wall with this woman, and trying to reconnect with her dad, which is a lot harder than she expected, both to deal with these romantic feelings and to deal with her father. So that's what this book is about.
Interesting, Miss Gwen. And how do you handle self doubt, rejection, or negative feedback without derailing your work?
Oh, that is a question. I have written another novel and I'm in the process of querying it. And so far I have only gotten negative responses, which is really hard, which is really kind of like, oh my God, no. Like when I went querying Returning to You, I had a much higher success rate than what I have for this novel. I'm like, oh no, I can't believe that my writing has gotten worse. But then what I feel like I keep having to tell myself is in many cases it is subjective. Um, Different people are going to enjoy different things. And I've noticed that specifically since I have so many short stories, there are some things that connect with people and some things that don't, which really just have helped me realize that not everything is going to be for everyone. And so that's what I keep having to tell myself is okay, this story might not be for this agent or this story might not be for that reader, but I know it will belong to someone else. Um, and the other thing that helps is if you just keep a record of either a physical record or a mental record of all the positive things people have said about your writing, you could return to it when you're having a bad day.
For sure, Miss Gwen, for sure. The Love Anthology. Can you tell us about this book of yours?
Yes, so the Love Anthology is actually one of those anthologies where I was a contributing author. So I mentioned before that I'm part of a writers group. That writers group is called the Writing Journey, and every year they put together a anthology. The Love Anthology was the first one that I had joined as part of this writers group. And it's a pretty unique process because it's not like the anthologies that I have joined that have been put out by small presses. In that situation, a small press is like, hey, we have an anthology coming up. Here's our theme, submit a story, and then you hear yay or nay. Going through my writers group, they turned it into a creative workshop. So they had a theme and then you submit a story, but then it's almost a year-long process. You're going through 3 rounds of critiques where you're getting 3 critiques every round. So by the time the anthology is published, your book has been or your story has been seen at minimum 10 times. So it's a pretty intensive process. Like I said, it takes about a year to go through all of the writing and the drafts of the story, but then also for the editing team to physically put together the book. There's the copywriting, there's the developing the cover, there's the physical formatting of it. And so the Love Anthology, like I said, was the first anthology that the writing group had put on that I was part of. The theme for this one is all different types of love. So, what my story had been about was actually two sisters who had been separated because of just it's that time of their life. They're no longer living at home, their jobs have taken them to different parts about the country, but how they're still making the effort to connect with each other via late night phone calls. They're really the only two constants in their life. And I dug into that in my story for here, which is actually based off of my own relationship with my sister. So, like I said before, I sometimes mine my own life for stories.
And congratulations for that,
Thank
Miss
you.
Gwen. Thank you so much for empowering people all over the world through love, love, love. As an independent author, Miss Gwen, what are your short term and long term goals?
So it might sound so scary for anyone who's trying to be an indie author as well. But my short term goals really are just to have a profitable year. Still trying to get there. It
Yes.
takes a lot of money to put out a book. So
True.
that's my goal is to have a I always pull in income every year, but pulling in more revenue than I'm spending on, say, marketing or cover designs, or maybe a new writing software. I haven't quite gotten there yet. That's my short term goal. My long term goal is I would um, this is going to sound maybe very nerdy of me, but I would love it if one day I could see fan fiction of my stories on the web. That means I'm probably going to have to move into some novels. People are more likely to write fan fiction for novels than short stories. But to me, that is the ultimate form of people showing their love for your work is that they loved your work so much that they were inspired to continue to create and to continue to explore in that world. Um, I don't think I am probably there yet as an author. Like I said, I don't write the material that usually calls to people in that way. I feel like I still have some growing to do as an author, but long term, that is what I would love to see for me at some point in my career.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Gwen, and looking forward for more and more profitable books to come.
Thank you.
And Miss Gwen, what would be your piece of advice for those people out there want to write their own book too?
I say just sit down and start writing, and don't feel like you have to be a novelist. You can be a short story writer. So many people start in short stories. And it's a different brain space than novels, but sometimes that's just where you need to be. As long as you sit down and write, you'll get there.
Yes, indeed. People stop procrastinating. If you have the passion to write, write, and share to the world. Written with pride. Can you tell us about this?
Yes, so this is one of those books where I was part of an anthology put out by a small press. In this case, the small press was not a pipe publishing. And Written with Pride was a response by the publisher to Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, to the point where some of the profits from this actually go to supporting gay rights in Florida. I was actually really happy to work with this publisher. They were super accommodating, very queer friendly. All of the books in this, all of the stories in this book are written by queer authors. Mine specifically is a science fiction tale about a woman who is preparing for a solo mission to Mars by going into an isolation chamber to make sure that she can handle the mental pressure of it. And my inspiration for that is I really wanted to see what would happen if you took an extrovert and forced them to be alone for several weeks. And that's kind of what happened here. Um, but that's what Written with Pride is. I'm very happy and that I was accepted into this anthology and that I continue to work or would like to continue to work with this publisher. They have a anthology that they're currently accepting submissions for, so fingers crossed I get into that one.
Well, thank you so much again, Miss Gwen, for producing different genre of books. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season as well, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in its fifth season too. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love letters in each third season, and movie 101 review and music 101 in its fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Miss Gwen, how has your writing process or philosophy changed since your debut book?
Oh, um, quite a bit, I would actually say. When I had originally started publishing, I like I mentioned before, I had that story go viral. So I really just kind of wanted to throw things out there. And I found that for a while, was kind of chasing that sense and that feeling. I was like, oh, I know this is what people have liked before. Let me try to see if I could replicate it and couldn't. um, and so I think what has happened is I have really just leaned more into what type of stories speak to me? What do I want to write? And I think I have been a happier, better writer for it. It means I'm chasing things less and I can really just sink back into the passion of writing stories, which is what had drawn me to the medium to begin with.
Miss Gwen Tolios, thank you so much for sharing your books to the world and for sure for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to us. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Yes. So please, you can find me around the web, wherever. I'm Gwen Tolios, and my new book, Healing Crystals and Other Breakables, is out June 24th. You're welcome to pre order a copy if you're curious.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Gwen Tolios because if you support her more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Miss Gwen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Modicon people, see you soon.